One of the persistent questions that I receive on an almost daily basis is this a mortal sin? Usually the question's offered with great detail, and more often than not, the person who's asking the question states, I'm just going to be safe and assume that it is mortal, unless you tell me something different. First, in partial response to the question, or for any question for that matter, it's not helpful to seek reassurance repeatedly about your moral life. Seeking reassurance does nothing more than fuel the continuing capacity for the suffering of OCD and the scrupulous condition. It does seem to satisfy the anxiety, at least for the moment, but in the long run, it effectively prevents any real growth in the spiritual life. Seeking constant reassurance erodes your own ability to discern what's important and necessary. Even the most scrupulous person in the world has a core moral system that directs their conscience. It is necessary to learn to trust your inner wisdom if you have any real hope of learning to manage your scrupulous condition. I know it seems risky and it produces anxiety, but it is necessary to take this step and wrestle with this challenge. Secondly, not only is it not a good thing to constantly seek reassurance, but it's also not the way that people without scrupulosity live each day. This is a helpful observation that encourages healthy living. People who do not suffer with the scrupulous condition live their life with a certain confidence that they're doing good and responding to the experiences of life in a positive manner. They do not slice and dice each decision and examine themselves over and over again. They engage life in the belief and in the understanding that life does not have a secret roadmap, and that's not full of traps and snares. Life is meant to be lived, not feared, and certainly not questioned every single moment. It's perfectly natural and pleasing to God to live life in this way. It's not a moral failure, and it's certainly not sinful. Now, with that somewhat extended preamble to our question adequately considered, I can answer this question. Is it a mortal sin? Not only is this question reflective of an inner struggle and a certain questioning, I'm also going to presume that this is a question that you have been asking for more than once. I assume it's also a question that's generated by the misuse of social media or some other kind of research that you are engaging in order to solve your dilemma. I say this not to be flippant or cruel or argumentative. It's an observation that's born out of years of pastoral experience. Scrupulous people, unfortunately, spend valuable time and energy each day researching and looking for answers. One resource that is used for this desperate search is often the internet. The internet is full of supposed experts and moral guides, and it's not difficult to stumble upon a commentator who is not concerned with your individual spiritual health, but is trying to score theological points in the battle for theological positioning and relevance. These theological and cultural warriors who are representing a tradition that is not Roman Catholic do not hesitate to inform a person that their particular concern is in fact mortal. They do this in an irresponsible manner, never truly taking into consideration the teaching of the Church or what constitutes full consent and full knowledge, which are necessary requirements for mortal sin. The best pastoral advice and direction, the most honest answer to any person who might ask a question about their moral life and responsibility is to refer that person directly to a trusted confessor or spiritual director. No other response is acceptable, and no other response is honest and truly helpful. The necessary dynamic in discerning culpability in matters that we are unsure of is to enter into a conversation with someone who's able to help you determine cause, effect, responsibility, full knowledge, and consent. Another person can also help you understand the nuances that are at work in decision making. This is not to help you wiggle out of responsibility or to seek some sort of compromise of principle, but is rather an honest discernment. Mortal sin, after all, is deadly, not accidental. It destroys the relationship between the person and God and leads to eternal damnation if the sin's not confessed and forgiven. It deserves the effort of real discernment before it is identified and claimed as mortal. A confessor or spiritual director will help you discern the presence of mortal sin by first of all helping you determine if the action is strictly forbidden in either sacred scripture, canon law, or consistent church teaching. In other words, for the sin to be mortal, it must be self-evident that it is indeed mortal. Not what you might feel or think, but what is actually and truthfully mortal. The confessor will also help you to determine with some degree of confidence, since it is very difficult to determine what a person might rightfully identify as my will. Traditional considerations might include: were you fully awake or half asleep? Would you have carried out the action, even if you thought about it in detail? Or is it really just a thought or a fantasy? Were you so disconnected from your true self, either because of distraction, apprehension, or some other experience that made it feel like you did not know what you were doing? In addition to these traditional points, the confessor or spiritual director will help you determine if you truly consented to what you may have done, or was there some degree of resistance in your consent? For example, even though you thought of something or imagined it, it would also be true that you know that there's no real chance that you would ever really do it. You fear doing it, or fear the consequences of doing it, and would therefore not do it. Another consideration would be to understand that your basic orientation towards life is to faithfully serve God. That is your dominant intention, and you would not truly expressly consent to mortal sin. Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, but hopefully it does at least illustrate the serious considerations and deliberations that are necessary when determining if an action is sinful, let alone if it's mortally sinful. Mortal sin is a serious matter, and the discernment of mortal sin must also be serious. It should not be the first thought that comes to mind, particularly for a scrupulous person. It should rather be recognized for what it is, a fear generated by the scrupulous condition, to convince you that you are eternally vulnerable and worthy of condemnation. Is it a mortal sin? No. In all probability, it's the fear and the anxiety of sin. There is a difference.